Welcome into this week's edition of the Dog Walk Talk. It is Wednesday, October 13th, and I'm your host for today, Palmer Thombs, joined by Adam Luckett of Kentucky Sports Radio. Adam is a member of the On3 Sports Network, and appreciate you joining us today, Adam.
Palmer, thanks for having me on, man. Excited to talk some ball with you.
Yeah, we talked earlier today for a great Q&A piece that we've got over on DawgsHQ. Strongly encourage you, whether you're listening from Kentucky or Georgia, to head on over to DawgsHQ and check that piece out. Adam with some great insight on the Cats, and we're going to continue to break it down today. Adam, I guess let's start here with Kentucky off to a 6-0 start this season under head coach Mark Stoops. What's the atmosphere in Lexington like?
People are excited, to say the least. 6-0 for the first time since Bear Bryant was roaming the sidelines in Lexington. You beat Florida for the second time in 4 years. You beat LSU in their first trip to Lexington since 2007. You handle your business against everyone else. And now you look at the rest of the schedule. Kentucky has this tall task this weekend, heading down to Sanford Stadium, play number 1 Georgia. But other than that, Kentucky's looking at like we're going to be a favorite in every game except this one right here against Georgia. So let's just go down there and roll the dice, see what happens. But no matter what happens, I think people are dreaming big, obviously. If you win Georgia, what could happen? But big picture, I think people realize that this has to be a chance to all of a sudden be like this crazy good season. New Year's 6 is a legit possibility, potential Sugar Bowl trip for Kentucky fans, which would be all time for people around here. And then there's obviously, even if you lose to Georgia, there's a playoff avenue too if you win out, I think. So the excitement levels are off the charts. It's been a slow, methodical build in Lexington for Mark Stoops, and they're knocking up open doors. But then all of a sudden, it seems like they've been able to kick open some doors this year, and it's setting up 6-0 versus 6-0 here in the middle of October for the SEC East against Georgia down between the hedges.
Yeah, first time that two SEC East teams have met this late into the season at 6-0 or better. And I feel like it's kind of the same story in Athens with the way that Georgia has this number 1 spot for the first time in season since 1982. You mentioned Kentucky coming in as an underdog. How did you feel when that spread opened at 24.5? To me, felt a little big for what it's borderline top 10 matchup.
Really the main thing it told me was Vegas is trying to figure out Georgia. Like, they're trying to figure out how good Georgia is right now because they just keep blasting teams on the field. I think they've covered every spread outside of the South Carolina game. In that one, South Carolina needed a score on Georgia's twos there at the end of the game to score a touchdown. So I really think Vegas is just at this point where they're just keep raising the number higher and higher to just try to figure out what's the baseline level for Georgia this season. And for Kentucky, I get it. Kentucky has played to their competition this season. Outside the UL Monroe game, they messed around against Chattanooga. Missouri, they had a chance to blow Missouri out there in the second half, had a fumble at the goal line that really kind of turned that game. And they dropped an interception in the end zone. Either one of those happened, and it's probably a 21, 24-point victory there for Kentucky. They're at home against Mizzou. And then they really kind of did. And then against South Carolina, they were -3 in the turnover column in a low possession game. And so there was no real chances for them to kind of extend the lead against South Carolina because of those turnovers. But if you go and watch that game on a play-by-play, quarter-by-quarter basis, they really kind of own the game. It's just the turnovers gave that South Carolina a lot of opportunities, and they kind of put it together against Florida and LSU. But they still had moments. Like against Florida, the offense, I think, was 1 of 10 on third down. So they did some good things on offense, but they could not get a drive together really because they couldn't extend drives. They failed miserably at situational football, which was kind of odd because they've been a really good third down offense all season. And then I think you saw everything kind of come together against LSU, but even then the defense had a couple lapses there late in the game after the game was in full control. So slowly but surely they've kind of been putting it all together. So I get why maybe Vegas is a little hesitant. And then you add that together with Georgia just blistering teams to start this season. I understand why. I was thinking 18, 19, 20, about which was around what the Arkansas line was originally, and I think it dropped quick there before kickoff when JT Daniels got ruled out. But I get it. I would probably set it 18-19, but I think we're at 23.5 right now. That's not too far off from what I thought it would be.
Yeah. I think I'm with you there, that I thought it would probably open in that similar range to Arkansas. Which, it brings up another point. If you're a Georgia fan and you're a, season ticket holder or whatever, you came into this year with the home slate, not having a big name on there, no, Tennessee's on the road, Auburn's on the road. Your marquee matchup in the non-conference is a neutral site game. You get Georgia Tech on the road. A lot of Georgia fans were looking at this schedule like ho hum, whatever. But turns out the last two home games have both been, top 10 or top 15 matchups. College game days rolled into town for both of them. So, pleasant surprise for Georgia fans that it will be packing the stands at Sanford Stadium on Saturday.
Yeah, my question for you would be, I watched College Game Day a little bit that day, 2 weeks against Arkansas. I watched the game. Obviously, game day leading into noon kind of creates kind of a different vibe, but the place sounded like it was on fire. And then obviously you get out to a 21-0 start. It obviously it's going to be that way. I think, for Kentucky coming in, do you think it's going to be kind of that same atmosphere? Is the excitement the same? I mean, because Georgia Kentucky hasn't won since 2009 in this series. It's only won, I think, twice in my lifetime down there. So, I mean, it's obviously they've had their way with Kentucky, but do you think there's still going to be that excitement? Because I know the cocktail party is just around the corner, and I know that's, the huge game there every year. Is there an excitement for, like, we're playing a top 11, top 10 team, or is maybe Kentucky sneaking under the radar a little bit?
I think had Alabama won at Texas A&M and Georgia was number 2 coming into this game, there would be maybe that sneak in factor of Kentucky. But the Aggies get it done in College Station. Georgia catapults to number 1 in the rankings, and that's brought about a new sense of energy here in Athens. You won't hear Kirby Smart and the players celebrating it, but the fact is Georgia is getting all this national attention as, this potential playoff lock, this team that's in their own tier. And I don't necessarily agree with either of those two things. I think there are other teams that are in the, same tier as Georgia. By no means do I consider them a playoff lock with two top 25 matchups in their next 2 games. If you get through October and you're undefeated, maybe you can start talking that. But you've still got a tough test on the road at Tennessee. You obviously, if Georgia handles their business over the next couple of weeks, you've got a matchup in Atlanta for the SEC championship that may or may not matter, for the Bulldogs, but you want that right of, claiming that SEC championship trophy. So I think there's a lot to play for still for Georgia. And that, there's this, like I said, this new sense of energy in Athens this week with the number 1 ranking. I think that's something that a lot of Georgia fans are taking a lot of pride in, that, it's been since 2008 that they were the number 1 team in the country. They came into that season preseason number 1, according to the AP, but, didn't have the best of openers, won, but didn't look great and dropped down to number 2. It's been since 1982 when Herschel Walker was still roaming the sidelines for Georgia. That they were number 1 in season. So I think that there's going to be a huge boost from the crowd Saturday. And a jolt of that energy when the PA announcer announces them as the number 1 team in the land. I think that is absolutely going to set that Sanford Stadium crowd on fire, and that that's exactly what Kirby Smart wants. You mentioned that Arkansas game, and you saw the impact that this crowd was able to have early in that game. Forcing back-to-back false starts on the first drive. They were messing with the cadence on the punt that Georgia ended up blocking, and that energy, Georgia, the energy from the stands, the players rode with that, and like you said, jumped out to a 21-0 lead. atmosphere is like at College game day. I think fans are going to get started early. Like you said, it's a little bit different this time since it's a 3:30 kick rather than a noon kick. I think the fans will show out to College game day and attend in Myers Quad, before they move over towards the stadium for their pregame festivities over there. Versus last time it was, noon kick. You gotta get in and like Kirby was saying with that one, get in early, be loud and all that. So I think that you will see the atmosphere in Athens all day Saturday be similar to what it was in that first quarter against Arkansas. Adam, let's talk Will Levis here. To me, the biggest difference is with this Kentucky team. It's still a physical football team. It's still, Kirby Smart has said that he has praised them as, one of the most, they're either their most physical or one of the most physical games that they play every year. That's just kind of, Mark Stoops' thing. And he's had his teams ready to play some very, physical games against Georgia. Hasn't necessarily shown on the scoreboard as of late, but, you've seen Georgia come out of those games banged up. Last year, I think they lost 3 defensive linemen, because of what Kentucky was able to do on the offensive line. So you've still got that physicality. There's still the run game that's strong. Defense is strong. That's Stoops' calling card. The biggest difference to me is the offense this year and the ability to pass the ball downfield. Adam, what are your thoughts on that with the addition of transfer quarterback Will Levis, who made national news for his banana eating habits, but is also making creating storylines with his play on the field.
Yeah, banana ball is running rampant in Lexington for sure. But with Levis, he was a raw around the edges prospect. There was times at Penn State where you saw some, plays that made you sit up in your seat a little bit. So he comes to Kentucky. He wins the job in, literally like 10 days. He shows up a month before camp. Camp starts. They have maybe 6-7 practices. He wins the job. Joey Gatewood transfers to UCF. So it's his show for the whole season. And so, the talk of all camp was like, man, the offense, the passing game is really looking good. Multiple players on both sides of the ball were like, it's really going to be different this year. And a lot of that was powered because they just had a new quarterback in there that can make some throws that the previous quarterbacks of the Stoops era just could not make. And you've seen some of that. You've seen him hit on some deep shots. You've seen him really stretch the field vertically on a lot of deep posts and over routes and really some wow throws, wow moments with him. And then also there's a reason he was a run first quarterback and a Wildcat short yardage player there at Penn State. We've also seen him lower his shoulder and get some tough yards. So there has been some exciting plays for him. It's just the play-by-play process and the consistency. He struggled with some intermediate throws over the middle, most times coming out too hot or too high. Some simple swing passes to the running backs have been off target more often than not. So with him, there's still intricacies he's working through. You can still see the ceiling, the high ceiling, but there's been some low points. He did not play well against South Carolina or Florida. And so there were some down points for the offense where they were like, well, what do we have here? And then he bounced back and really played his best game of the season against LSU. They got him going on the run game early, which seemed to calm him down. And then he settled in and was very efficient throwing the football, both in the short, intermediate, and deep passing game. He had probably 2 or 3 of the best throws he's had all season were in that LSU game. And so for him, he's still growing. I think at the November bowl game, Will Levis is going to look a lot better than even the Will Levis we'll probably see Saturday in Georgia. And then next year, Will Levis, I think, potentially, if he keeps growing, has a chance to be one of the better quarterbacks in the SEC. But for right now, he's still a work in progress. And he's playing for a new offensive coordinator who's calling plays for first time at this level. So I think there's been some growing pains there too. But together, you're starting to see some signs. And he, like I said, he can make some throws that keeps defense honest at the least. Like you're going to have to play when Wan'Dale Robinson lines up, you have to respect that because you have to respect his ability to get behind the defense. And no matter where he gets, Levis can get the ball there. He's got that kind of arm. And so that element alone has just, I think it's helped Kentucky a lot on offense, and it's just kind of created what Mark Stoops wanted, the blueprint he wanted. He still wanted a physical downhill running game, but he wanted to make defenses pay with the play action. They'd be able to hit passes to create explosive plays with the passing game. And I think that's kind of what's happened at Kentucky. And that's why their offense, they've taken a lot of jumps in certain areas, and a lot of it's because defenses, I think, have to respect that long ball.
Yeah, and you bring up Wan'Dale Robinson there, another transfer coming in from Nebraska. The new faces in that Kentucky offensive meeting room certainly making their impact known between Levis, Robinson, and offensive coordinator Liam Cohn. How have you seen guys like Robinson complement what Cohn wants to do as an offensive coordinator? Like you said, Stoops still wanted this physical, efficient run game to be present, and it absolutely is with the SEC leader in rushing, Chris Rodriguez. But at the same time, you've also got the SEC leader in terms of receiving yards in Wan'Dale Robinson. So, how have you seen, some of these guys that have been around the program, plus guys that are new to the program in Levis and Robinson, create that balance and find that, perfect harmony that Mark Stoops has wanted for quite some time?
The addition of Wan'Dale Robinson just gave them a true bona fide perimeter playmaker that is a pro. He's going to get drafted. He's a pro, and he makes big-time plays. Kentucky force feeds him the football. Jet sweeps, screens, intermediate passes, deep passes. They are looking to get him the ball in as many ways as possible. He leads them in targets by I think it's 30. He has 57 targets this year. Second guy, I think, is Josh Ali at 26. Now, Ali didn't play last week, but that's on a per-game basis. He's getting 6-7 more passes, it seems like, than these other guys. So they are force-feeding him the football, and he's just a big-time playmaker. Yeah, I mean, you've seen him make plays against everybody on Kentucky's schedule so far, and Kentucky has not had that. There's been a lot of talk and publicly with Stoops about how they need to get more playmakers at the receiver position, kind of directly talking to some of the recruits they're targeting right now. And that plays out on the field. They have one in Robinson and they need more. And so for him, that's what's kind of allowing the offense more than anything. The scheme helps, obviously, but you got to have the dudes to go make the plays, and he's a dude. And so Kentucky hasn't had that too often at receiver in the Stoops era, and they have it with Wan'Dale Robinson. Other areas, Josh Ali was looking like a solid number 2 receiver. He's not playing on Saturday. That's a significant loss for Kentucky. And then also tight end Keaton Upshaw was potentially an all-SEC caliber tight end entering the season. He was lost before the year. Right before camp started, he had, I believe, a weightlifting accident towards pectoral muscle. So he's out for the season. So you headed into the year thinking your top 3 guys were going to be Ali, Wan'Dale Robinson, and Keaton Upshaw. Kentucky's out 2 of those guys right now. So it's caused them to get a little younger. Isaiah Cummings is a sophomore. They've moved from receiver to tight end during fall camp, and they're using him a lot. He's playing more and more as the weeks go on, but he's still a work in progress. By the end of the season, they may have something with him at that position, but it's methodically trying to work him in. And then they got some other veterans they're just trying to plug into the other gaps, and they get the ball to tight ends, Justin Rigg and Brendan Bates. And so it's the offense passing game is really a work in progress. I mean, Wan'Dale is a dude, but after him, if you can slow him down, Kentucky has big question marks there. They just got a guy back 2 weeks ago, Jaton McClain, who's kind of half wide receiver, half running back. He caught a 25-yard touchdown for a wheel route there against LSU. He's going to be a guy I think it's going to be a heavy portion of the pass game, and you might be able to start seeing his workload maybe ramp up this week. But Kentucky's just really thin at wide receiver. They just don't have the guys there. It's why the addition of Wan'Dale Robinson was so big for them this season. It's changed just everything, because without him, they would probably be having a lot of the same issues they had on offense last year. But with him and the play calling going hand in hand, it's kind of opened everything up for them. And it's allowing them, really, when you look at some of the numbers, like Kentucky's not a great offensive team, but it's got a chance to be like a top 30, top 35 offense. And with their defense, that's going to beat a lot of people. It might not beat Georgia's very often, but it's going to beat a lot of other guys. And it's kind of set with a manageable schedule. It's setting up where they can win a lot of games this season.
Yeah, Adam, I'm really curious to see how Georgia's going to go about defending Robinson, because if you've looked at Georgia's season. The biggest challenge that they've faced in terms of receiving, would certainly be Traylon Burks, but a completely different style of player. Burks being on the massive side for receiver. Georgia limited him to 3 catches, 10 yards, no touchdowns, as Arkansas was shut out. But the player that has probably given them the most trouble in terms of receiving is a smaller guy in Josh Vann in that South Carolina game. So I'm very curious to see the ways that Georgia tries to handle defending Robinson and whether they've decided, how they've learned from that Josh Vann experience. Believe he had over 100 yards against them. And
all deep shots too to him, because I remember scouting that game for when Kentucky played South Carolina the next week. And Vann had like 170 of their 300 yards, it felt like, or whatever it was. Just
3 catches, 128 yards.
Right, 128 of, I think they had 320 yards of offense that day. All came from him.
Yep. So like you said, 3 catches, 128 yards. That is, a big play, whenever he's touching the ball. 42.7 for the average.
Right.
If Georgia is giving that up to Wan'Dale Robinson, he can make them pay in a similar way that Josh Vann made them pay. Giving up a touchdown, their first defensive score of the season at the time. It's going to be interesting to me to see whether Georgia approaches it with, by a committee approach with Wan'Dale Robinson, or whether they want to take, one guy and leave him on Robinson the entire game. Georgia's done different approaches there, and typically sticks to one side of the field, and leaves their cornerbacks on one side of the field to eliminate some of the chaos that guys moving around the field can create. And I think Kirby Smart, knowing what kind of corners he has, knowing his defense, they really like to play that man-to-man on the outside. So. It's certainly a challenge when you face a guy like Robinson, because he can, if you go man to man on him and you leave a corner on an island against Robinson, he can make you pay. And like you said earlier to me when we were doing that Q&A, Levis has a bazooka of an arm and can make you pay, if Robinson is open. So it's certainly going to be interesting there, especially if you think about the way that teams have covered Robinson, being forced to kind of bracket him, and give some safety help over the top. Georgia is very banged up at safety, has, Lewis Cine is in there. He's healthy, missed a play last week, but, ended up coming back in, had the, wind knocked out of him. But they did lose Chris Smith to a shoulder injury. His shoulder popped out of place. They were able to pop it back into place, and he was in and out of pads on the sideline, ended up not re-entering the game. Injury occurred on the first drive of the game, and walk-on Dan Jackson stepped in. So Georgia very limited there at safety in terms of depth. They lost a couple guys to the transfer portal in the spring and summer at that safety position. Major Burns is a guy who's playing big minutes for LSU. That Georgia would absolutely love to have him now, back in Athens, but obviously he's balling down in Baton Rouge, and so that means that Georgia is having to cross train some guys. Latavius Brini, who is their normal starting star, had to step over to safety when Cine, headed to the sideline. So you had Lewis Cine you had Dan Jackson and Latavius Brini playing safety, with Tyke Smith, who's coming off of an injury, playing star. I believe Tyke is going to continue to work his way back into the lineup, but he's got he's a star that they cross train at safety when they're not in a nickel or dime look, is what Kirby Smart told us. And it's hard for him. It's going to be hard for him to get some playing time because of the way that Latavius Brini has been playing in the secondary. So certainly an interesting matchup on the outside. In terms of the inside and the way that Georgia, has handled the run game this year, and the way that Kentucky has run the ball. I think, you put out on Twitter that these two teams are strength on strength. You've got, Georgia wants to run the ball. Kentucky's great at stopping the run. Kentucky wants to run the ball. Georgia's great at stopping the run. And it's going to be interesting to see how they to that. But in terms of the matchup between the Georgia run game and the Georgia defense stopping the run with their front seven, big front seven, Jordan Davis and company against Chris Rodriguez and this very, very talented Kentucky offensive line. How do you see that matchup kind of playing out?
Yeah, like you said, more times than not, both these head coaches just want to play football in a phone booth. They just want to line up and try to outman the team across from them. It's both kind of in their winning philosophy. And so I think you're going to kind of see two people butting heads in this game. For Kentucky, they've got a really good offensive line. Darian Kennard, I think, is the best run-blocking right tackle in college football. I think he's up there for being one of the best tackles in college football. He moves people at the line of scrimmage. He's a great run blocker, but he's going to be facing a tough challenge. For me, when I look at this matchup, inside is where the issues are going to be when you look at Jordan Davis, Jalen Carter going up against Kentucky's interior. Luke Fortner is a really good center. But around him, if you're looking for the two weaknesses probably of Kentucky's offensive line, it's at guard, right guard Eli Cox, first-year starter, left guard Kenneth Horsey, second-year starter. Horsey's more of a pass blocker, probably the weakest run blocker on Kentucky's front. And then Cox has some power, but, he's young still, so he's still going through some growing pains. So for Kentucky, it's getting those guys blocked. And then Kentucky's run game is very inside zone heavy. So you're leaning on double teams inside right there, and getting those guys blocked can be very difficult. Now, Chris Rodriguez did have a lot of success relatively against Georgia last year, ran for over 100 yards, and he's really kind of catching his groove here the last couple of weeks. The Florida game, he had limited touches, but he was they were keeping ahead of the chains every time he ran the ball against Florida. He only carried the ball 16 times last week, but ran for 147 yards, really roasted LSU. And so he's getting going. It's for Kentucky. Really, the interesting part for me in this matchup is just how schematically how Liam Cohen gets the ball to his dudes. He's got two guys, Wando Robinson, number 1, Chris Rodriguez, number 24. How can we effectively scheme it up so they can get effective touches in the game? Obviously, Wandell, you can do some different things, but Rodriguez, you're going up against a bear of a defensive front and trying to run the ball. It's going to be tough. So figuring out what they can do. Kentucky has faith in their offensive line. They should. It's one of the better groups, I think, in college football. But this Georgia front is it's a different animal that they're going against. So it's a big test for Cohen. The Florida game was not a good moment for him. Ty Grantham got the better of that matchup, it felt like. But they bounced back last week, and that you saw, it felt like you saw the whole package from him, why you would hire him. Everything they did was right. They had LSU out of sorts all game. So for him, this is a big moment for him because Kentucky, they went out and hired him to, the goal is to win games like this eventually. We still need to get better players, still need to recruit better, but the goal is to win the division, go to Atlanta. That's the goal. But to do that, Kentucky feels like they have the defense to do it now. I think Kentucky's walking in this matchup, and Mark Stoops and Brad White are sitting in their position room, and they're saying, all right, if we protect the football on offense, don't lose the field position battle, we can hold this offense to 17 points because I think we can stop the run, and I think we're good enough in the back end where we can eliminate big plays and make Georgia earn drives. So we can hold this team to 17, 20 points. But Stoops is also thinking, for me to win this game, we got to be able to score. And so that's why you went out and hired a Liam Cohen, and I think this is a big test for him. You get, everything's on the line. I think there's a house money factor here for Kentucky. Because you lose this game, you can still, you can be 10-2 and in the top 10 at the end of the season, or 11-1 and in the top 6, 7. So, and you can lose to an undefeated number 1 team in the country. But you do need to see a little bit of proof of concept from Cohen. You want to be able to have some faith in that offense that moving forward, you could potentially win a game like this. And so I think it's a big test. I'm interested to see how he matches up with Kirby Smart and Dan Lanning because there's no real hiding from what Georgia wants to do. They get a little creative with how they pressure the quarterback, bringing linebackers and stuff, but most of it is just we get our front 3 is better than your front 5 blocking us, and we got guys off the edge that can speed rush. And so, can Kentucky match that? What can they do to have some success? That's really from the Kentucky side. I think it's the most interesting thing in this matchup because I think on the other side of the football, I think Kentucky now they have some defensive line injuries. But I think they feel good about matching up with Georgia. I think playing them every year obviously helps with that. And I think their scheme is a little different than Arkansas's, where they can maybe have a little bit more success stopping the run, where Arkansas is playing, 6 defensive backs a lot. Kentucky's going to get big and make Georgia run over them.
Yeah, you bring up the other side of the ball when Georgia has the ball and Kentucky's on defense. Mark Stoops feeling confident there. Georgia's rushed for over 200 yards in the past 3 games. One of those against Vanderbilt. They ran for 243. And then you mentioned the Arkansas outing. They put up season high 273. They just barely got over the 200-yard mark on Saturday against Auburn. Took they were up above 200, and then they dipped right back below and ended up at 201 with a Dejan Edwards run. Will be very interesting to see if Georgia can run for another 200-yard game on Saturday. But you bring up the injuries there that Kentucky has on the defensive line. Georgia is incredibly banged up on the offensive side of the ball. JT Daniels is the big storyline, and quite frankly, I would not expect him to play on Saturday. I think that Georgia's being incredibly precautionary with this injury. A grade 1 lat strain, similar to what Dak Prescott and the Dallas Cowboys dealt with during their preseason. So to me, Georgia is doing anything and everything possible to keep Stetson Bennett in the game and let JT get healthy at least through this bye week. Georgia takes the bye and then heads to Jacksonville for Florida. You can't look too far down the road, but if you can get through this game with Stetson Bennett, that's absolutely what Kirby Smart wants to do. And I think part of that means telling Stetson, less designed runs for Stetson. You saw him scramble for a 30-yard pickup against Auburn. That was not designed by any means, but you're not seeing the QB draw as much as you might, with him. He's not a bruiser in terms of what he does as a running back, as a runner, in his style. But he's able to extend plays with his legs and pick up yardage when he needs to. Drew a targeting call on Smoke Monday against Auburn as he scrambled towards the pylon. And like I said, got that 30-yard pickup and hit the Heisman pose in the middle of it. Certainly funny to see that photo. But in terms of outside of that, Georgia's banged up too. I mean, at wide receiver, you've got Jermaine Burton and Marcus Rosemy, Jack Saint both missed the last game at wide receiver. Burton dealing with a groin, Marcus Rosemy, Jack Saint dealing with a ankle injury that he suffered against Vanderbilt. So he's missed the last 2 games. Georgia hasn't had Arian Smith in several outings. He suffered a shin contusion against, I believe it was UAB. I can't remember whether it was that UAB game or South Carolina, but he's been out for quite some time. Dom Blaylock hasn't played since the 2019 SEC championship game when he suffered a torn ACL, retore it last preseason. And then as he's been working his way back, he's been dealing with a little bit of a hamstring injury. Kirby Smart said that they don't expect him back this week. Same goes for Amir Speed at corner. There was an injury update there. On the offensive line, Jamari Salyer is banged up. He rolled his ankle, been going through practice. But, I think what's been impressive to me so far this year with Georgia is when those injuries have occurred, who has stepped up? Well, in the case of Jermaine Burton, they had Ladd McConkey step up and play on the outside. He's used to playing in the slot. Well, he played that Z position and put up 150-something yards on 5 catches. Team high there for the Bulldogs against Auburn. You saw Broderick Jones step in at left tackle last week. A very talented guy that Georgia feels confident in at left tackle, but hasn't necessarily been able to beat out a senior in Jamari Salyer to take over that left tackle spot, even though Salyer is a more natural guard and they would probably like to get him in at guard. This feels like a perfect opportunity. If you feel confident with what Jones did against Auburn, if Salyer's not able to go and they feel confident with what he does this week against Kentucky, Jones, that is, to me, this injury to Salyer feels like an opportunity to let Broderick Jones get comfortable at left tackle and earn his spot there and then move Jamari Salyer inside. So definitely some storylines there. But to me, the biggest would be, and if they're going to be, like we said, these are two coaches that would like to play this game in a phone booth. I feel like that's a great, great way of saying that. And, to me, how do you feel like, Adam, how do you feel like Kentucky is going to go about trying to stop the run and forcing Georgia to play, maybe left-handed and get Stetson Bennett throwing the ball?
Yeah, Kentucky's base package this year has been kind of a 3-3-5. You've got your four typical secondary players, and they got kind of like a hybrid safety type linebacker. The main reason they did that is because redshirt sophomore J.J. Weaver tore his ACL on Thanksgiving Saturday against Florida last year. So they were very thin at that edge position. So they didn't know when they would have him back, really. Thankfully, he's been able to recover really fast. He's played in every game this year. He's made some big plays. But throughout the season, we really haven't seen him and Jordan Wright kind of play together in that base 3-4, which has kind of been what they've been under Stoops and Brad White. I think this is kind of a game where you probably play them together. I think they're two of probably Kentucky's best 5 or 6 defensive players. So it's allowing you to get your best 11 on the field. So for them, I think you could see them get those guys on the field to kind of help set the edge, keep everything tight and inside, and try to feed everything into your middle linebackers and your interior defenders. For the inside, Kentucky, really, Juan Mccall was a top 200 kind of recruiting rim for Kentucky out of Detroit, a senior nose tackle, one of the biggest nose tackles in college football. He was lost in the Florida game. And you recruit a Juan Mccall like for this game, for when you want to play football in a phone booth, to give you your guy to plug 2 gaps there at the line of scrimmage, take up blockers, and make running the ball hard. So losing him was a tough loss. Now they got 2 guys behind him that are sophomores that are both going to be really good players. Justin Rogers was another big recruit out of Detroit, and Josiah Hayes was a big recruiting win for Kentucky out of Mississippi. But both of them are young and going through some growth. Like there's been great moments. Like Justin Rogers kind of owned Florida center in that game, which was really surprising from what we've seen before him. But then he kind of got lost in the shuffle there a little bit against LSU. So he's a young player. You're getting those ups and downs. And then at their tackle position, kind of 3-tech, 4-tech there, Octavius Oxendine's another sophomore. Really came on the last 2 weeks, started playing some good football. He was lost with a knee injury for the season in the win over LSU in the fourth quarter, unfortunately. So after him, there's real depth issues there at that position. They've got some bodies, but that's the weakest position on their defense. There's no, I don't think, real hiding from it. So for Kentucky, Abule Body Fitzgerald is kind of a redshirt senior, kind of a developmental player. He's going to be the starter there. I think they're going to rotate bodies there, but it's going to be hard for Kentucky, I think, to hold up there when Georgia sends some double teams that way. So how Kentucky counters that is going to be one of the things I'm watching early in the game. For Georgia, what we've seen here last 2 weeks, people are starting to run away from Josh Paschal. The defensive end on the 3-down defensive end on the other side, he's been a wrecking ball. He was the best player on the field against Florida. He was the main reason why Kentucky beat Florida. And that was a Florida offense that came in with the best rushing attack in college football. They're averaging nearly 8 yards per carry with all this option stuff they were doing. And Paschal, they couldn't get him blocked, and he wrecked a ton of it. Kentucky held them nearly half of their season average total yards, and then 3 yards below their yards per rush average. And he was a big reason for that. If you turn on the tape, he was just everywhere. And then he made a lot of plays against LSU last week. So for Georgia, I would run away from Josh Paschal. I mean, it wouldn't take me much to figure out. So I think Kentucky, how they handle that, it's really kind of be the game. And then for Kentucky, like last week, I think Georgia saw a lot of man against Auburn. At least that's what Auburn did against LSU. That's what Derek Mason's kind of MO is there. Kentucky's not going to give you much man. They're going to drop into zone, a lot of cover 3, and they're going to make you dink and dunk down the field. The way you get them out of that is really just to establish the run it down their throat, get them out of that, or you just have an efficient quarterback that can hit small, tight windows and good receivers. Some of LSU's receivers are able to get in some of those windows and win some matchups last week, but Georgia's banged up at receiver like you talked about, and that maybe put a lot of pressure on Stetson Bennett throwing against an experienced secondary. Usually Kentucky, not many misassignments, are usually in the right spots. So that's a foolproof strategy, but it's all based on, holding up against the run a certain amount. And Kentucky, without one of their, a little thin there defensive line, that's a huge question mark in this game. If Kentucky can be stout and hold up against the run, I think they're going to have a chance to get Stetson Bennett in some advantageous passing situations. But if they're not and they can't stop the run, then they're going to have to get out of what they like to do and play maybe some more man. And that's not where Kentucky is really super comfortable. So that's kind of the matchup there. It's really all about the run game to me here on this side of the ball. If Georgia's able to have some success, run for 250 yards on a decent per average clip, it's going to be a good day for Georgia on offense. But if they're not, if Kentucky makes them earn it and they have to, it's not a lot of success against the run and they're in a lot of 3rd and 7s or plus whatnot, then I think Kentucky could have a pretty good day on defense. And then I think you could see something where it's a pretty close game in the 4th quarter if Kentucky's able to do that. So that's really the matchup here. I think Kentucky, they have to slow down that run game. There's no getting around that. If they do that, I think they like their chances going to get Stetson Bennett and those receivers and their zone coverage. But if they're not, they could be in trouble.
Yeah, to me, and maybe it's because we both cover teams that have been known for their ground and pound. To me, it always starts with your ability to run the ball and your ability to stop the run. If you're able to run the ball and you're able to be balanced on offense, if you're able to stop the run, you force the opposing offense into some passing situations where you're able to get pressure on the quarterbacks, which is something that both these teams are able to do.
Yeah, it's strength on strength in this matchup, both sides of the ball.
Absolutely. Well, Adam, I don't know how y'all handle predictions over there, but we handle ours later in the week. But just want to get your final thoughts on this game. Maybe a potential player of the game, and maybe a score prediction. A midweek feeling towards how you think this game might go.
Yeah, for me, looking at this matchup, it's just hard for Kentucky right now because these programs are mirror images of each other with how they play, how they coach, style, everything. Georgia's just got better players. So when that's the situation, you have to make it up for there in the margins. And the best way you can do that is at quarterback. If you got a quarterback that can go and make plays and you got receivers going one-on-one, I don't think Kentucky has that right now. So it's for Kentucky to win this game, it's got to be a limited possession game, and they've got to be like +2, +3 in the turnover column. It's just hard for me to see that happening. Kentucky hasn't forced a lot of takeaways this season towards the bottom of the SEC. So I think Kentucky's going to be able to hang in there. I think they're going to have a little more success on the ground than most teams have had against Georgia this year, which is not a lot, but it will start something. I think they're going to be able to hang around, and I think stylistically they're going to get in a game with Georgia where it's going to be hard for one side or the other to blow each other out. So I think they're going to be able to hang around, but I think Georgia's probably going to keep them at arm's length for most of the game. I'm thinking somewhere like 27-13. Right around something around there. Like Georgia kind of has control, but Kentucky's never fully out of it. And then late in the 4th quarter, it kind of becomes clear that Kentucky's not going to do this today. It's Georgia's day. But a physical football game, both teams playing hard. I think you're going to see a lot of collisions. But it's just hard for me to see Kentucky getting over that hump. And I think really probably the MVP is probably just going to be that Georgia defensive front. I think they'll probably bottle up Chris Rodriguez, which is not easy to do, and that's going to make life difficult for Will Levis and the rest of the Kentucky offense.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think Kentucky is able to run the ball a little bit better than what some other teams have done. You saw it last year that they gave Georgia some trouble running the ball, and that was a very talented Georgia run defense last year too. But Chris Rodriguez, like you said, topping 100 yards last season in that game. I think Georgia, like you said, I think this is a game where Georgia has the players to go out and beat Kentucky. But it's going to be a physical battle, a 4-quarter battle. I don't think Georgia covers the spread, and I think it's probably similar score-wise to what Georgia had last week. My prediction last week for Auburn was 31-10, and my gut feeling midweek is that I'm probably going to be somewhere in that same range, maybe a little bit closer. Like you said, like a 27-13 type game. Both these defenses are strong. Both these coaches, love a strong defense, have a strong defense, have a strong run game. So like you said, mirror images of each other. And it's certainly going to be interesting to see how it plays out in a top 15 battle between the hedges on Saturday.
No doubt.
Well, Adam, really appreciate you coming on with us this week, and tell our folks where they can come find you.
Yeah, KentuckySportsRadio.com is my home on the World Wide Web. Twitter, Luckett, KSR. Check us out. Pumping out a ton of content this week, and we'll be down in Athens, man. Looking forward to see you, Palmer.